Walking through the backyard, we go walking. Then you look into my eyes. How am I gonna get through? How am I gonna get through?
Before Adele, before Amy Winehouse, before Blue-Eyed Soul became a genre, there was one woman who shattered every rule in the music industry by pretending to be someone she wasn't. She wore wigs like armor. She dodged questions like bullets. And when she opened her mouth to sing, it wasn't pop, it was pain. But what was she hiding? And why did it nearly destroy her? This is the story the tabloids ignored, the radio stations covered up, and the history books softened. The real Dusty Springfield didn't just break hearts, she broke herself. She wasn't born dusty. In fact, Mary Isabel Catherine Bernadette O'Brien barely spoke above a whisper as a child. Raised in post-war London in a strict Irish Catholic household, she often hid in corners while her father played classical records in the living room. But there was one moment, just one, where everything changed. She heard Ella Fitzgerald's voice through the static of a radio dial, and suddenly the quiet girl was gone. "I knew then," Dusty would later say in a 1965 interview, "that my voice was the only honest part of me." But even honesty had a cost. Behind her mother's stern gaze and her father's brooding silence lay a family unraveling behind closed doors. Her brother Tom, who would later form the Springfields with her, called their childhood a performance of pretend happiness. Mary learned early on how to smile in public and suffocate in private. In 1960, Mary transformed. The brown hair was gone. She bleached it until it glowed under stage lights. Heavy mascara turned her soft eyes into a barrier. And the name, Mary O'Brien, disappeared. She was now Dusty Springfield. Alongside her brother Tom and musician Tim Field, she co-founded the Springfields, a folk-pop trio polished for Britain's rising television scene. Their harmonies were airtight, their smiles flawless. But Dusty was hiding something. She didn't care for folk music. In fact, she privately mocked it, once writing in a letter that the melodies were tea-time tunes with no meat on the bones. What she wanted desperately was soul. Real, raw, American soul. But in the 1960s England, a white woman singing black music was considered both inappropriate and suspicious. Dusty was told to stay in her lane, so she sang the part for now. In 1963, Dusty traveled to New York. She walked into a Harlem record store and heard the Exciters' "Tell Him" playing through a Dusty stereo. And just like that, everything she'd suppressed came bursting out. She returned to London and quit the Springfields within the year. Her debut solo single, "I Only Want to Be With You," dropped like a bomb, combining pop sweetness with soulful bite. The public didn't know what to call it. The press called it Blue-Eyed Soul. Dusty called it Finally Breathing. But her transformation wasn't just artistic, it was personal, and it was dangerous. Behind the scenes, executives warned her not to lean too far into Black American music. One executive even told her, "White girls don't sing like that. And if they do, they don't last." Dusty ignored them. She flew to the U.S. and started recording in Memphis. But what she found there would test everything she thought she knew about identity, race, and loyalty. American studios were different. In Memphis, she wasn't a star, she was a stranger. When Dusty Springfield walked into American Sound Studio in 1968 to record what would become Dusty in Memphis, she was surrounded by Southern session players, mostly men, mostly skeptical. They didn't know who she was. They didn't care. And when she tried to take creative control, requesting retakes, adjusting mic positions, they looked at her like she was insane. She was insecure, but knew exactly what she wanted, recalled producer Jerry Wexler. The studio wasn't used to a white English girl calling shots on soul arrangements. Wexler had produced Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles, Wilson Pickett. But Dusty made him nervous, not because she wasn't good, but because she was too good, too emotional, too raw, and too broken. She demanded the lights be dimmed while recording. She whispered to producers that she couldn't sing unless the room was safe. She cried in the vocal booth more than once. The result? A record no one understood. Dusty in Memphis was a masterpiece. That flopped. Critics raved. The public ignored it. It sold poorly and almost ended her American ambitions. But one song, just one, would survive the ashes. Son of a Preacher Man. There's something strange about that song. Son of a Preacher Man wasn't originally meant for her. It had been offered to Aretha Franklin, who passed on it. But Dusty, she clung to it. The lyrics weren't just catchy, they were coded. A preacher's son, forbidden love, an impossible romance whispered in secrecy. It was more than fiction, it was Dusty's life.
Preacher's son, Daddy would visit, he'd come along when they gathered around and started talking.
By the late 1960s, rumors had already started circulating. She didn't date men. She never spoke about relationships. She was evasive in interviews. The British press hounded her with insinuations. In 1970, she finally snapped. In a public interview with the Evening Standard, Dusty said, "I know I'm perfectly as capable of being swayed by a girl as by a boy." It was the first and only time she'd publicly acknowledge her queerness in her career peak. The backlash was instant. Radio stations dropped her. Religious groups protested her shows. Even record executives began distancing themselves, quietly shelving promotion efforts for her next album. What did she do? She disappeared. For most of the 1970s and early 1980s, Dusty Springfield was barely visible. She moved to Los Angeles, changed apartments frequently, and kept no consistent public address. She didn't tour. She barely recorded. And when she did, it was chaotic. According to legal documents from a 1981 contract dispute with United Artists Records, case number 81-CV-2745, Springfield violated multiple deadlines, failed to deliver promised vocals, and missed entire studio sessions. Producers said she was emotionally unwell and over-medicated. Friends whispered about prescription pills and alcohol. Some blamed the music industry's rejection. Others blamed the mirror she avoided every morning. Dusty once said, "You can hide from the cameras, but you can't hide from yourself." She changed her name on check-ins. Sometimes she wore scarves so fans wouldn't recognize her in public, and often she claimed she'd retired from music. But even she didn't believe it. In 1987, her phone rang. On the other end, Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe from the Pet Shop Boys. They had written a song. They wanted her voice, and they didn't care about her past. The song was called "What Have I Done to Deserve This?" The irony wasn't lost on Dusty.
I've been hanging around, I've been wondering why I'm feeling down.
That line felt like it came from inside me, she said later. I sang it like a confession. The track was a surprise smash, hitting #1, 2 in both the US and UK, and for the first time in 15 years, Dusty Springfield was back on the charts. The press called it a comeback. She called it a resurrection. Suddenly, record labels returned her calls. She recorded a new album. She appeared on TV again. Her voice had aged, but it hadn't weakened. If anything, the cracks made it more believable. But just as the second act was beginning, a lump appeared. In 1994, Dusty Springfield was diagnosed with breast cancer. She didn't tell fans at first. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted silence. Close friends said she was stoic in public, but terrified in private. During chemotherapy, she kept a small notebook where she jotted down unfinished lyrics and song ideas. The final page simply read, "Not finished yet." Despite the illness, Dusty kept recording. Her final album, A Very Fine Love, was released in 1995. The title was ironic. It was her least promoted record, and critics barely noticed. But one track, Where Is a Woman to Go, carried an eerie weight.
Tell me where is a woman to go?
It wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about Dusty. Where could she go? The industry had forgotten her. The labels had moved on. The public loved her voice, but never knew her name. And yet, someone remembered. In March 1999, Dusty Springfield died at the age of 59. She passed away just 10 days before she was scheduled to receive one of the highest honors of her life, induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But even in death, she refused to be ordinary. Per her wishes, her ashes were buried beneath a marker that read, "Here lies Dusty Springfield." She made music her way. The British government flew its flag at half-mast in her honor. Elton John called her the greatest white singer of soul there ever was. Aretha Franklin sent flowers. And in a quiet corner of London, a fan left a note on her grave. "You taught me how to feel, even when it hurt." So why isn't Dusty Springfield a household name? Why, when we talk about Blue-Eyed Soul, do we remember Adele? But not the woman who made it possible? The answer may lie in what Dusty feared the most. She never fit anywhere. Not in England, not in America, not in the gay community, not in the straight world, not in folk, not in pop, not in soul. She lived in between the genres and in between identities. And maybe that's what made her timeless, because Dusty Springfield didn't want to be understood. She just wanted to be heard. And when you hear her, really hear her, you're not listening to a pop star. You're listening to a woman who bled through her music. So the rest of us didn't have to. Today, artists sample her work without even knowing her name. Her vocal runs echo through modern R&B. Her image, bleached hair, heavy eyes, theatrical sadness, has become an archetype. But her real legacy? It's not in charts, it's not in vinyl, it's in the moments where someone, somewhere, plays a song and feels less alone. So the next time you hear "I Only Want to Be With You" or "Preacher Man" or "The Look of Love," don't just sing along. Ask yourself, who was this woman? What did she hide? And why did she spend a lifetime trying to sing her way free? The answers aren't in her songs, they're in her silence.